Hi guys, welcome to another episode. Today we're going to talk about how to control a 6-strokes linear fill on top of 4, which means that we're going to play 6 notes on top of a 4/4 count, and this becomes an irregular cycle of notes for us, so we have to learn to control it, so exactly know when it starts and when it ends in between the bars, and when it ends after the 4th bar, so that we always hit the 1 in the right way. So first of all, we're going to start keeping our hi-hat on 4, counting every one of the 4/4 notes, and then we're going to accent the first stroke of the 6 strokes linear fill. So in this way. Okay, so we understand that, of course, what we're playing with our hand, it's a circle that's longer than what we're doing on our hi-hat. But we will have to keep in mind that if we're playing in a musical context, so with other people, everybody else is going to play, in this case, following our hi-hat. So when the cycle on the snare drum finishes, we're not going to be on the 1, but we will be over the 1, and so that won't be, we won't end and fall on the 1 like everybody else will. So second step now is to understand when does the circle of 6 finishes based on the hi-hat, and then we'll have to be able to count the 4 notes with our hi-hat while we're playing this on the snare, and stop when the new 1 is of the circle of the hi-hat bars, so that we know exactly how this starts and ends in a 4 measures, so in 1 bar basically, so in this way. Okay, so now we understand that the pattern that we're going to play sounds something like having this in mind is a great reference for some of these linear fills, or anyway, it can be a good reference for us to have in order that when we improvise and when we're in the music, we have this kind of pattern going on, ta 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 ta, which sounds like a clave almost, but it sounds like musical to our ears, and we can control this feel, the 6 strokes linear feel, even improvising, just by hearing this, just by keeping, train our ear to hear this. So for example, if I would have to start working on this feel and make it a linear feel with the bass drum and maybe moving this around the set, a good way and a simple way to start this would be substituting the accent with a bass drum note. So for example, putting the hi-hat in, it would sound like this. Okay, so basically what we're going to hear, it's always the same kind of pattern, but instead of having the clave thing played with the accent stroke, it will be with the bass drum. So okay, so at this point we know that when we're playing in a 4/4 situation and we play something like we automatically we will start and finish in the right way, and we don't need to count, we don't need to have any of that, because we've learned how this sounds. And so this is the first step. This helps us to control this by hearing it with a listening type of control. Of course, physically, it's the same thing. So when we want a physical reference in things, we want to have the foundations, the main structure played by the bigger muscles. So, for example, in this case, the accent would be arm motion, so using the bigger muscles, or the kick will be a leg motion, so still a bigger muscle. And then everything else can be, played by smaller muscles, so like wrist motions, ankle motions, or finger motions. For example, we can think of playing a pattern like putting a 5 on top of this, playing a 5 with our hands, so something like okay, this could be a linear feel. Putting a hi-hat in, it would sound like this. Okay, so now we already have our first linear feel, and we know exactly how to start and finish it because we have this reference, both listening and physical reference. And if we put this in a simple groove, this is the type of effect that we would have. If we start to speed this up, we can start having a pretty cool effect or something like this. And so on. So just by moving my hands around, adding some ghost notes, this type of linear can already take a completely different taste from what we were doing at the beginning, which was a very simple, 6 on top of 4 type of thing. And people can barely understand the type of lick that we're playing, which that's not even our goal. Our goal, of course, is to be musical and be creative with a 6-stroke pattern. So this is pretty cool. And right now we started our 6 strokes starting with the bass drum note. We can then do the opposite thing and start with the 5 strokes with our hand and end it with a bass drum note. So let's see how this would sound. Okay, so there are fewer bass drum strokes and less references for us because it's not the 6 pattern is not dictated by this bass drum anymore. So we will have to kind of relearn musically, or not relearn but get used to it musically. So we'll have to practice this to the point where we have this in our mind, like musically, without even thinking about it. So we'll just repeat this for a bunch of times until it doesn't become natural. So to the point that it becomes something like this. Another good thing that we can do in this case is when we want to move this type of pattern around. Since we are playing 5 strokes with our hands, we can start once with our right hand and once with our left hand, and when we move it around the set, this will allow us to play something like this. And so it also helps us with agility on the set, which I think it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool effect. And these are all solutions with only putting one stroke of the bass drum either at the beginning of the 6-stroke roll linear fill or at the end of it. But we can also put a double stroke with the bass drum inside the 6-stroke pattern. And for example, use a paradiddle with our hands, which would sound something like this. Or we can put the double bass drum at the beginning of the paradiddle, which would sound something like this. Okay, so there are thousands of solutions that you can then come up with and work on this and be creative. So the two most important things are, first of all, learn to listen, learn to hear this type of the 6 strokes linear pattern on top of a 4/4 bar measure, so that we know exactly how it starts and how it ends, and we know exactly how to control this, and then build physical references dividing the bigger muscles motions from the smaller muscles motions. So for example, when I play the paradiddle with the double strokes, my concentration and how I will divide this, it's going to be in this way. These are the bigger muscles moving. Even the double stroke with my bass drum, I use the slide technique, and so it still is, there is the involvement of the ankle motion, but it's a leg motion mainly, so I'm still using the bigger muscle that dictates the timing. So then I will add all the other micro muscles or smaller muscles motions completely in the paradiddle. So in this way, I always have the perfect control of what's going on. I have no timing issues, and I really teach to my brain how my body will move when I will have to play something like this. All the accents will fall in the right place because the bigger muscles are trained to land in those specific places. Then the more we will practice this, the more variations our brain will learn, the more things we'll be able to play, and the better it is for us because we will have way more solutions. And there is no shortcuts in this. Of course, our brain and our ears and our muscles will learn specific motions, and it will become easier and easier to come up with similar ideas. But then when we want to, learn a new 6 strokes linear feel, we will have to break it down a little bit just to have the perfect, execution of it. There is no shortcut in learning this type of stuff. Of course, the more we will do this, the more we will be able to create similar variations, moving it around the set and finding different sounds with these stickings or similar stickings. But then if we want to learn a completely new sticking of 6 on top of 4, we will have to break it down and learn all those motions again, and our brain and muscles have to learn those solutions. There's no other way to expand our vocabulary. There is no one exercise that will unlock the world for you. It's like learning to speak. There is no one sentence or one word that will allow you to speak the entire new language. You have to, take a book and learn every single verb, every single word, and it'll take time. And the more you practice it, the more you use it, especially applying it in the music. So practicing, the application, talking, the more it will get in your brain, in your ears, and in your muscles, and the more you master that. So now we have a new world to discover, and 6 strokes linear fills in metal drumming or any other type of drumming can sound very good. So it's on you now to be creative and come up with different ideas and play around with this and have fun. I'll see you next time.